Right, so today is a very special day. We are filming the initial ownership review of my M340i, a car that is built around that very special B58 engine. So I took my time to film this review, and I apologize, you guys had to wait so long for this. But I had to complete the initial running in process, and I really abide by those old school guidelines. So in today's video, we're not going to do much of the exterior and interior show and tell, which we've already covered in the delivery video. So if you guys haven't seen that video, make sure you do check that out. Today's video review is going to focus more on the driving aspect, the engine performance, the M Sport braking system, the M Sport suspension, the MLSD, and the handling and the steering departments. Starting off with this. So lately BMW has been accused of slapping M badges on every car under the sun. But what about the M340i? Well, is it an M Performance? Is it an M Sport? Is it an M Light? That's what we find out in this video. So to be honest, this car is actually positioned opposite the C43 and the S4 or the S5, which everyone knows by now. So this M Performance lineup is the M Light, you can say, or an baby M. But whatever it is, this car surely deserves that M badge in front of the 340. Oh. So let's be honest, the upcoming M3 and M4, they are going to be much more faster and aggressive than the M340i. So there is no direct comparison, because those S58 engines are really tuned to be an aggressive track weapon. And that's what those cars are. What about the M340i versus the M3 and the M4? Those cars may not be as good on everyday livability, the overall sound acoustics when it comes to the cabin noise insulation, and also the ride quality, which is definitely a paramount importance for an everyday driver. And that is where the M Performance lineup comes into picture. When it comes to BMW, a large part of the enthusiast and the purist community fail to accept the newer cars or the new generations and any of their engines or upgrades to be the best in whatever they or the BMW engineers have set out to do. And that is true for me as well. And to be honest, when it came to the M340i, particularly the B58 engine, I'm sure, and I've seen online on the forums as well, that a good amount of purists as well as enthusiasts are all in favor of the B58 engine to be probably the best non-M 3 Series engine, a straight 6, come out by BMW. And what better to resurrect the Supra brand than the B58? So that says a lot, that the B58 was picked to actually be the successor for the iconic 2JZ engine. But the B58 has been there around since a while. It actually debuted in 2015 with the F30 on the 340, and that time there was no M340. So that was the original B58. And then few years later it got a technical update. So after receiving a technical update, a good amount of parts were actually changed for the B58. It was not merely a software job. And that's when the M340i's B58 was born. And because in that technical update, it got two power variations. One was the mid-level output, which was a 340 horsepower. And then second was the 382 horsepower, which the M340i has. And that but that 382 horsepower is on paper, and thankfully we don't drive on paper, because this, if we drop a few gears, oh my god, doesn't feel like a 382 horsepower car. BMW has been notorious for having undercoating their engines, and this surely feels much more than 382 horsepower, which has been quoted officially. A lot of owners in the US have actually managed about 360 wheel horsepower, so that makes it well over 400 horsepower at the crank. not only the horsepower numbers seem to have been undercoated, but the 0 to 100 timing, which actually is factory coated at 4.4 seconds, I feel that's again BMW being a bit too conservative. Genuinely, this car feels like it can do a 0 to 100 run in 4 seconds dead. And I don't have a V-Box right now with me to measure that out for me, but definitely we need to make a separate video trying to see how fast it is than that factory coated figure of 4.4 seconds. Very few engines actually pack such muscular performance, at the same time be silky smooth at the same time. And this engine sound, I know there is some sound pumped in through the speaker, but overall the exhaust, the engine, the artificial sound pumped in through the speakers, everything makes the experience fantastic. With XDrive security, that too.
At the outset, the XDrive badge on a 3 Series is something which the purist or the enthusiast will not approve of. But let's just understand what this XDrive does for the M340i. And starting off with point number 1, this XDrive never gives, because it's not designed to, any more than 50% of the power to the front wheels. And importantly, point number 2, it can give up to 80% of the power to the rear wheels. So that makes it drive like a rear-wheel drive. And that is where this XDrive, the engineering of BMW, comes into picture. And we are going into some corners. Let's just explore more of that. I haven't pushed the car to its limit because I'm still scared to do so, but I genuinely feel it's very rear biased and you can really control the car. With the rear, with the right foot, and that is something which makes it very special. So yes, it is having the perfect amount of playfulness, and I would say predictability is very precise with this all-wheel drive system. And I am a rear-wheel drive guy, so I like rear-wheel drive cars. But to be honest, putting down close to 400 horsepower in a rear-wheel drive can get slightly dangerous on such situations. That is where the XDrive comes into picture. So there, when you saw we were into that corner, performing that handsome drift, and when the car realized that things may get out of control, and that is when the XDrive comes to the rescue to put the car back straight in the line and propels it straight down the road. And that is the beauty of this XDrive on the M340i. I have no doubts in mind that with the Sport Plus mode activated and the DSC turned off, this car, even with an XDrive, would be capable of doing good amount of donuts and slides all day long. But my car is still new and I really love my Michelins, so I haven't tried that now. Eventually, definitely, as I get an opportunity, I will smoke some tire. But right now, it does feel extremely rear biased. So yes, not only the XDrive pays importance to the traction, but also highly prioritizes the overall driving dynamics. This is going to be an absolute weapon when it comes to driving in the monsoons as well. So we get the M Sport suspension as standard on the M340i. There is no adaptive suspension available even as an optional extra. And so I am okay with that, because definitely I would always prefer less of electronics if I want to keep the car long term post the warranty period expires. So yes, the M Sport suspension is overall on the stiffer side, and it does give you a ride quality which is not really comfortable at low speeds on bad roads. But as soon as you are on good tarmac, at a slightly higher speed, it really evens out. And you really don't understand, or maybe don't remember, that this is actually a performance sedan with a stiff, low riding sport suspension. So that's how good it is. Particularly, thank God we got rid of the run flats. So that has also really contributed to making the ride quality good. But more on the ride quality later. The suspension. So this suspension gets shorter springs which are stiffer. At the same time, the front part of the suspension seems to be designed to give more mechanical feedback to the steering wheel, and that is always a good thing when you are not having the conventional hydraulic steering. But also, whereas the rear suspension is doing a great job in keeping the M340i nice and flat. I say this because the F30 was really bouncy. The M340i also gets stronger anti-roll bars, and also by now everyone would be aware that this M Sport suspension in the M340i is riding 10 millimeters lower than the conventional 330i G20, which is on sale in India. So overall, all this translates to very good handling performance. So when you put the M340i into a corner, the initial turn-in is very good. The mid-corner balance is something which is again very confidence-inspiring. But where the M340i excels is the corner exit. There the XDrive really kicks in and propels the M340i the way it should. On a winding road, it really excels, and you end up using the trees ahead as braking markers, and that is where you realize the M340i is an extremely good handling car. Some credit also goes to the G20's chassis, which is 20% stiffer and up to 50% stiffer in certain places. So that is a huge improvement over the F30 chassis. Not only that, the track width has been widened, and the front tires, specifically the front wheels, use a more negative camber. So that all helps in better turning in versus the regular G20. Let's not forget that we have some very, very sticky tires. The Michelin Pilot Sport 4Ss, probably they are the best in the business in extreme performance summer range. And not only they are very sticky, but they are also overall, you can say, lighter compared to the original equipment run flats. So that reduces the rolling resistance. At the same time, it does offer a good ride quality compared to the run flats. So that is something which is again an added advantage which you will always have when you switch from run flats to regular tubeless tires. So let's get back to comfort mode. So I would say, all in all, the M340i, particularly in the XDrive trim, is having limits far beyond a regular driver can achieve on public roads. Another ingredient which adds to the entire M flavor for the M340i is the electronically controlled mechanical limited slip differential. So this MLSD is seeming to be having a mind of its own, and to be honest, it adds to that overall playfulness for the M340i. It allows the back end of the car to come out a bit to a certain limit, to a limit where the car knows that the driver may not be able to handle that drift any longer, and when the driver thinks the car is about to spin out, it never does. So that is the job of the MLSD, and I kind of like it that M Performance division cars are being given the MLSD, and this definitely overall you can say complements and justifies that M badge on the 340i.
So the sound of the engine has a good amount of muscularity to it. It sounds, growly at low to mid RPM range. And as the RPMs rise, it gets high pitched. So that is absolutely a fantastic sound. It's not too loud, to be honest, but just right. At the same time, there is a good balance of engine sound and the exhaust sound. So that has been engineered well by BMW engineers. And do note that this is still the standard exhaust system. You don't have the M Performance exhaust system. So that means that this sounds good for something which is not M Performance. So the M Performance upgrade is still available for this exhaust. And currently, this exhaust system has been designed in such a way that it has split two exhaust tailpipes separately, very much early in the system, probably to make it more efficient and better on performance.
I am a manual gearbox conservationist, as you know, so I would have always preferred the M340i with a manual gearbox. But that is only reserved for the M3 and the M4 if you want to buy a BMW in a manual. So that is something which is a big miss for the 3 Series lineup. So what do we get in the M340i? We do get the very smart and absolutely lightning quick for a torque converter, the ZF 8-speeder. And definitely this is surely one hell of a gearbox. This version of the ZF unit absolutely nails the ratios and exploits the engine torque to extract maximum performance as well as optimize the fuel efficiency from the P58. In the sport mode, the shifts are absolutely fluid and fantastic. You can say the gearbox has an intuition what the driver has in mind and does it for you. So that is where the ZF unit absolutely shines. On most occasions, making these paddle shifts mostly redundant. Speaking of paddle shifters, these are, you can say, one of the reasons where BMW could have made the M340i or the M Performance model lineup slightly more special, because these are also found in lower models, and though these are very good looking, and I really don't have much complaint, but they could have actually made it more special. For me, the best paddle shifters in the segment are found on the Jaguar XC, and those are really lovely and made out of proper metal and long. So that is still my benchmark for paddle shifters in this segment. Whereas these are doing their job. That's about it. So overall, this gearbox might not be as fast as the one in the Porsche, which is the PDK, or some of the dual clutches, but this is definitely fast enough, and overall the more logical choice to have in the long run. This gearbox also contributes in making the M340i economical, and though a performance sedan or a performance car and fuel economy don't go really hand in hand, but there are some occasions when you're traveling with some passengers or elderly people where you would not want to really go all out, and that is where I have tried some fuel economy runs, particularly in the EcoPro mode, and the car really goes into the coast mode, and you can really feel that this gearbox contributing maximum fuel efficiency from that engine. And I believe I have easily gotten 11.5, 12 kilometers per liter in mixed driving on long 100 kilometer runs, and I was really not even trying too hard to get the best fuel economy. And I have a friend who is another M340i owner from Pune. Most BHPians would know him. He managed 14.2 kilometers per liter on a Pune sprint. So that is really fantastic fuel economy for such a performance sedan, wherein with a flick of a button, oh, you can do this. BMW in the previous generation F30 took a good amount of heat for the steering tuning, and also a lot of purists were complaining that why the hydraulic steering was left from the E90 and it did not get carried over to the F30. So there was one reason which was clearly one of the best reasons I could think of is the pull drift compensation. So what pull drift compensation is that when you're driving on a road and there are some orientation lines on the road, so when you happen to cross those lines, the steering, in the case of a hydraulic steering, the steering would get pulled into it, and it was not that stable, particularly the hydraulic steerings, the old school ones. That cannot be compensated in a typical hydraulic unit, and only an electronic power steering unit can counter steer that through its software tuning, and that actually helps with this entire pull drift compensation to give the driver a much more confidence inspiring feel on those roads. So that was majorly a primary reason why BMW has omitted, not only BMW but mass manufacturers, mostly have omitted the hydraulic in favor of an electromechanical power steering unit. Overall, when you are in Sport Plus mode, the steering does get tightened up a bit, and there is a good amount of conversation happening between those front tires and the steering wheel, which the driver is a part of. And it's everything predictable. And again, it's thankfully partly because of the XDrive security, you are able to carry good amount of speeds in the corners. But overall, I think this steering is surely a step ahead versus the previous generation F30 steering wheel. Also, we do have to note that when the traction control is switched off, and this is an XDrive system, and in the scenario of if you happen to maintain a mature drift, the steering will not corrupt the power delivery by going into any crazy understeer, because we do have to note that the front wheels are not getting any time more than 50% of torque, whereas the rear can throw up to approximately 80% of power to the rear wheels. So there is not much of great chance of understeer happening, and the overall power delivery is never corrupted, and the steering is always confidence inspiring and doesn't really throw any significant signs of understeering. A quick negative about the steering is that thanks to the XDrive system and also the more negative camber at the front wheels, the overall turning radius, if you want to take a U-turn, is very bad, and it takes a beating, I'm telling you. And it's like I haven't experienced such a pain in my Fortuner also. So this is something which is a bad negative for the G20 M340i XDrive, the turning radius. BMW brakes are getting better and better and better, and these brakes what the M340i have probably are far superior to what any M car would have had probably around 10 years ago. So they are that good. In the M340i, we have the M Sport brakes as standard. We have front 4 pistons and rear 2 pistons. So there is enough stopping power, which overall contributes to the confidence-inspiring handling capabilities for the M340i, and enough stopping power again to keep that B58 in control. Overall, these M340i brakes really complement the M340i as a package.
If there's one negative which I would like to point in the overall entire driving experience is the weight of the M340i. So the G20 chassis has grown in size. It is wider, it is longer, and that has contributed more space and overall dimensions going up. And particularly for the M340i, if we talk about, thanks to the XDrive, it is a heavy car, and this is compared to a regular G20 330i, it is approximately 200 kilos heavier. So that is a good amount of weight gain. 200 kilos it can take care of. But actually right now when we took a corner, that time you do feel that extra weight compared to the previous generations, or probably something like an E46, which is another car I own. So definitely, I feel those cars have a great amount of weight advantage when it comes to the overall driving feel and the chuckability. So that is something a negative going against the M340i.
One of my favorite things about the M340i is that how understated it looks. Though BMW has tried to make it look pretty aggressive by adding all those M performance elements, be it the new grille, functional front flaps, or the trapezoidal exhaust, the M340i is a pleasant thing to behold, especially in this BMW's individual Tanzanite blue to metallic shade. Coming to the interiors, beyond the familiar focus on the driver, this BMW interior also places key prominence to an emotional balance between dynamic yet calming. Driving position is really spot on, and it doesn't take time to find your ideal seating position, which is a big compliment to the ergonomics for the G20. The digital gauge cluster is very smooth, clear and lag-free. For those who cannot adapt to the gauges, the fantastic head-up display with shift lights adds the BMW M driving experience for the M340i. iDrive 7 remains one of the most intuitive systems on the market, and features such as Harman Kardon system really ups the ante. However, speaking of the features, it's really disappointing to see that BMW India missed out on all of these features for the Indian spec M340i. Otherwise, the M340i could have been very well perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect car. If a perfect car would have been in existence, the automotive world would have gotten boring by now, as we would have stopped the quest towards making one. But if at all there would have been a perfect car in actual existence, then the M340i would have been very, very close to being that perfect car, at least in the Indian context. And on that note, thank you for watching.